Hey, it's Dave here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a physical step count dashboard using the cheap yellow display, which will show a smile or frown depending on whether you've hit your daily step count target. Now, before we begin, the idea was actually inspired by a smiley speed camera I saw, which shows a smile or frown depending on how fast you're driving. I thought it'd be funny to make something similar, but instead based on your step count, to hopefully give me a nudge to get me off my backside. Spoiler, it didn't work. So let's get things kicked off by enabling the step sensor on your mobile phone or smartwatch, and I'll walk you through some common issues like when your daily step count doesn't show any readings. To enable the step sensor on your mobile phone, go ahead and open the Home Assistant app. Then expand the sidebar. Then you're going to click on Settings. Then scroll down and look for Companion App. And then you're going to select Manage Sensors. Then under Health Connect Sensors, select Daily Steps and make sure Enable Sensor is checked. Now, if you do encounter a problem where the daily step count isn't updating, go back one step and I'm going to take you to an alternative step sensor. If you scroll down further, you should see a category called Steps Sensor, where you can then select Steps Sensor. Enable the sensor. Now you may notice the step count is considerably high here, and that's because it's the total amount of steps since last reboot. While ideally we do want the daily step count, just use it anyway, as I do have a workaround to achieve the daily step count from this reading, which I'll be covering shortly in this video. To enable the step sensor on your watch, open the Home Assistant app. Then you're going to scroll down and look for Settings. Then you're going to select Manage Sensors. Then go to Health Services and check Daily Steps. Now, if for some reason this doesn't show a value or isn't updating, go back one level and I'm going to take you to an alternative step sensor. Select Steps Sensor and then go ahead and check that box. And the same as before with the mobile phone, you're probably noticing these steps are much more than what you've done daily. This is because it's how many steps you've done since the watch was last rebooted. Ideally, we will want it to say the daily step count, but don't worry, use it anyway, as I have a workaround to obtain the daily step by using those figures, which I'm going to show you shortly. Another setting you're going to need to change is the update intervals. If you go into the Home Assistant app, then expand the sidebar and click Settings. Then you're going to go into the Companion app. And if you select Sensor Update Frequency, if you select Fast Always, the sensors are going to update every minute, which is a preferred choice because that way the step count is going to update as soon as it possibly can. However, this is going to put some strain on your battery. Now you could try the one above, which is fast whilst charging. That will still update every minute while it's charging and then every 15 minutes when it's not. But since you're primarily using this for the step readings, the chances are when you're going for a walk, your mobile device or watch probably isn't going to be charging. So you're kind of forced really to choose fast always unless you're happy to only have the sensors update every 15 minutes. So that's something you'll have to make that decision with and choose what works best for you. Now, for those of you using a step sensor instead of the daily steps count, here's a workaround to track the daily steps properly. Create an input number. This will store the total step count at midnight taken from the step sensor that resets on phone reboot. Next, create an automation that runs exactly at midnight each day. It updates the input number with your current total steps. Then, create a template sensor that subtracts the saved midnight value from your current step total that gives you your daily step count. Finally, this part is optional. Run the automation manually once after setting it up. Otherwise, your input number will start at 0 and show incorrect data until the next midnight. Manually triggering it sets the input number so the daily step count works right away. As you've probably figured out, if it's already 2:30 p.m. and you've done about 30 minutes walk before setting this up, the daily step count will only begin from the moment the automation first runs. It can't go backwards and include earlier steps. To create the input number, you're going to go into File Editor. And then from configuration.yaml, you're going to paste it somewhere here. And it's going to look like that. Now, because I've split my configuration.yaml, I'm going to save it in a different location. You'll see here, I've got input number, which is referencing a path. I'm going to go to Browse File System, go to the config folder, then select input number, and I've already created it earlier, which is here. And because I've split it, you'll notice the input number part is actually missing. So instead of it looking like that, I've removed this part here, and that's how it's looking when it's split. While we're in File Editor, we may go ahead and create the template sensor as well. You can either paste this into the configuration.yaml, so it goes somewhere like this. And the part you're going to need to change is the sensor that's pulling the steps. If I just open up another tab, and if you go into Developer Tools, go to States, and if you just do a search for steps, that's the one I'm going to be referencing, which is the total steps. So I would copy that. And then back into the configuration.yaml. I'm just going to overwrite that value. And then you would go ahead and hit save. Now, because I've split my configuration.yaml, if I just scroll up, you'll see here I've split my templates. I have to go to another location. So I'm going to go to the config folder, look for a folder called templates. And this is how it looks if it's split. You're also going to notice that template is missing from the top, and that's because it's split. So instead of it looking like that from the configuration.yaml file, this part is moved and the indentation is moved by 2 spaces to the left and will look like that. I'm just going to close that because I don't need to save any changes. Once you've created both of those values, what you'll need to do is go into Developer Tools, go to YAML, check the configuration's fine. And you can either just go ahead and give Home Assistant a reboot, or you can manually restart the input number here. And if I scroll down, you can do the same for template entities. The last part is we're going to create the automation so it will update the value of the input number at midnight. If you go to Settings, then go to Automations and Scenes. If you select Create Automation, then select Create New Automation. And if you click on the three dots and select Edit in YAML, we're then going to overwrite this code with this. Now the part you're going to need to change is this sensor. Again, this is the sensor that is getting the step count. You'll need to change that to whatever yours is. And then go ahead and click Save. And then I would just leave it as that name. Just click Rename. And now if I just go back one, I'm just going to go back into that automation. This is the fourth part, which is optional, where you can manually run this automation. So if you click inside here, and it's this second bit here you're going to want to run. So if you click on those three dots and do Run Action, that is going to run the automation that's going to get the step count and then save it into input number. If you run the top part, that won't work, because that top part is the condition of run at midnight, and that condition isn't met. So just make sure it's this part here is what you're running. Again, you don't have to do this, it's optional, because the values won't be correct until it hits midnight. Before you create the device and add it into Home Assistant, there's two things you're going to need to do first. Locate the entity ID of a device that is pulling the step counts from, and download a font and save it into a new folder called Fonts from ESPHome. To find the entity ID of the step count reading, if you go to Developer Tools, go to States, and then if I just do a search for daily steps, you can see here I've got sensor Galaxy Watch 6 daily steps. That's the entity ID where I get the step count from. And there you can see it's got the state of how many steps I've done. Go ahead and copy that entity ID and just save it onto a notepad or somewhere where you can later paste it. The next thing I need to do is download a font which I've linked in the description, and then create a folder from ESPHome called Fonts and save it there. If you go to File Editor, then click on Browse File System, look for a folder called ESPHome, click into that, then you're going to click New Folder, and you're going to give it the name Fonts and then click OK. I've already created it, so I'm just going to click Cancel. And then once you've created that folder, this is the font which you'll be wanting to upload. So you'd click Upload File, browse to the path where you've downloaded it, and save it in here. If you miss this section out, when you try to flash the device, it's going to fire up an error message because the font can't be found or doesn't exist. To create and add a device into Home Assistant, you're going to need to head over to ESPHome Builder. Then you're going to click on New Device. Go ahead and click Continue. And I'm just going to give this the name Step Monitor Demo. Then you're going to click Next. For select your device type, it doesn't really matter which one you choose because we're going to overwrite the code in a second anyway. I'm going to choose ESP32, and then you can go ahead and click skip at this section. Now you should see Step Monitor Demo appearing. At the moment it's going to be offline because we haven't finished configuring it. And we're going to select Edit. Now this is just the initial code it has created, and we're actually going to overwrite that with the sample code I've provided. But you will need to copy this because you're going to keep some of the values. Those values are the name and friendly name, the API encryption key, the over-the-air or OTA password, and the AP SSID and password. I'm just going to overwrite all of that, and it's going to look like this. Now I've added various notes in the comments section explaining how this works and what values you'll need to change. The way the smiley works is it basically knows when you are on or off target, but due to the sync frequency, I've set these three conditions as to when it's going to perform the calculation. One is whenever you restart the ESP device. The second is if the value of the daily step count changes. And the third condition is when the daily step target is adjusted. That's a slider bar, which I'll be showing you later. You should have done this earlier, but in the comments I've also referenced where to download the font, and it also says where you should be saving that font into your ESPHome and then fonts folder. The fonts folder is something you'll need to create because it won't exist automatically. Now there's currently two variants of these ESP32 boards that I've came across based on their chipset. One of which is this variation, and it seems to be in micro USB. And depending on which one you're using, you'll have to change some of the pinouts and reference the display model as different, which you can see here I have referenced. The other variation, which happens to be a USB-C one, and the chipset is this. I've also referenced the pinout as to which part you'll need to change below in the code. I'm now going to split the screen and show the existing code so you can see which sections I am copying and pasting into the new version. So on the right, you will see the initial code when creating the device, and on the left is my sample code which you would have pasted and overwritten. We're going to start off by updating the name and friendly name. If you leave the double quotes in there, we're now going to copy the API encryption key. Then we're going to do the over-the-air or OTA password. Then you've got the AP SSID. And the password to go with it. For step entity ID, that is the device where you're getting the step count from. In this example, I'm using my Galaxy Watch 6. Now for step target default, you may as well leave that value as it is. What it means is when you flash the device, it will initially set the default daily target as 10,000, but there is a slider bar where you can later change it. However, if for some reason you always want it when you've just flashed a new device to default to a number higher or lower, then go ahead and change that value. Otherwise, just leave it as it is. Now these two values here, you have to watch out for because the pin output is different depending on the chipset. Now in this example, the chipset version I'm using is this USB-C one, and the backlight pin for the screen is GPIO 27. In the other variant, it appears to be GPIO 21, and I've referenced it here in the comments and also in the comment section above. If this is set to 27, you must set the TX pin to 21. And if you're using the other variant, it's in reverse. So you'll either have that as 27 and that as 21, or that's going to be 21 and that will be 27. The final bit you will also need to change is the display model based on the chipset. In this example, the USB-C version I'm using, that is a display model I'm selecting. As I scroll down, the rest of the code you don't really need to understand apart from this section here where it's the option to create a static IP address. At the moment it's commented out, and what I would do is initially flash the device, then go into logs, reveal the IP address, and then uncomment it and choose that to whatever the IP details it's showing, and then save and flash it again. I'm now going to hit save, and then I'm going to go ahead and click install. Because this is the first time we're flashing a new device, you won't be able to do it wirelessly. So we're going to select plug into this computer. This is compiling the code and it can take a couple of minutes before it finishes. Now might be a good time to subscribe to my channel while you're waiting for it to download. Once that's finished, if you click download project, and you should see something here where it downloads a bin file. Then you're going to select Open ESPHome Web. Now what I would do initially is disconnect the ESP32 board. This will make sense in a second. We're going to go ahead and click Connect. And you can see here it's already listing a port. It's possible in your environment you may have several ports and you won't know which one is which. So what I've done is I've gone to connect, left the device unplugged, and now when I plug it in, you're going to see the new port and it's immediately obvious this is the one that I need to be using. Now I can click on that and do connect. We don't need to select prepare for first use because we've already configured it, and we're going to choose install. We're going to browse to the path where that bin file was downloaded to. Now before we click install, you may need to press the boot button on your ESP32 board, otherwise it will just be stuck in a loop and it will say connecting and won't go any further. I'm going to go ahead and click install. You can see it's saying erasing, so that's a good sign. So that's already connected and it's currently flashing the device. Once configuration is shown as installed, you can go ahead and click close. And you can also close that tab as well. And I'm just going to close that window. And come out of that. So now you should see your ESP32 board is now showing online. If you go into the logs, we're just going to find out the IP address. This is optional, you don't have to do this, but it's a personal preference. And you can see there it's got the IP address. It's also got the gateway and the subnet. So I'm just going to quickly go into edit. And I'm going to scroll down into that IP details section. Which is here. And I'm just going to uncomment these lines. So now what it's going to do is manually assign the IP, which is these settings here. I'm now going to go ahead and click save, and I'm going to install, and this time, because the device is already online, I can use wirelessly as a choice. Once that device has finished and it's flashed, we're going to go into settings. And if you go to devices and services, you should see the device here, which you'll need to add. Just before I do that, I'm just going to open up a second webcam to show you why it's a problem if you don't click add. So you should be able to see the step monitor is here, and it's currently got the smiley, but it's not showing the step count. Once you click add, it seems to resolve that problem. So I'm just going to do that now. And I'm just going to do submit. And now you can see the step count is showing an actual figure. Just going to give the location test rooms and finish. Now you're going to want to go into ESPHome, and you're going to find that device, which is this one here. So if you go into device, now the next thing you also want to do is confirm the backlight LED works and the onboard LED control works. So if I just toggle this backlight LED, the screen turns off. So that's looking promising. And then I can turn it back on. You can also click in here and set it at a particular percentage. So perhaps at night time, maybe you want it slightly dimmer. So I'm just going to come out of that. I'm just going to check that the onboard LED is working too. So that's looking good. The onboard LED is also working. And also, I'm not sure why you'd want to do this, but you can actually change the color. So if I just select another color, you can change the LED to another color. I just want it off because I find it's a bit of a distraction. So that's looking promising. The step monitor is working. It's showing the step count and we've got the correct pins. Otherwise the LED or backlight wouldn't be working. I'm just going to very quickly put the front of the case on just so you can get a visual representation of how it looks when you've got the cover. Now I've got the front cover on, it just adds a little bit more of a dramatic effect. I'm just going to tinker a little bit with the LED backlight because you may want it slightly dimmer to kind of go with the cover. So you may find about 50% actually looks a little bit better, because if I have it 100%, it's maybe a little bit overpowering and too bright. But I'll leave you to play around and find out what your sweet spot is in terms of preference and setup. Moving over to the daily step target slider bar, you may want to change it so your target is not 10,000 steps and something different. Now, if I move it over to the left and put it to 1,000, you'll see now it's smiling and it's gone green. And if I just move it back to somewhere else, it's back to frowning again. Because what it's doing is when you change that slider bar, it is calculating how many steps you've done of the minute of the day, and it will figure out whether you're on or off target. So that's one of the conditions where it does a calculation, and you can see it goes from smiling to back to being miserable, which is what it's always doing in my case because I never get off my backside. To add these buttons and sensor values to your dashboard, you're going to head over to Edit Dashboard. And if you select Add Card, and then choose By Entity, and you're going to start off by searching for your daily step target number. In this example, it's going to be called that. It will start off with the prefix number.step_monitor_. and then whatever you called it. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to repeat the same for the step monitor backlight, which should be light.step_monitor, and some naming convention you would have came up with. Select that as well. We're also going to select the onboard LED, which will also be light.step_monitor. So if I copy that in, and you can see it there, I'm going to check that as well. And the next part is the daily step count. Now, if you were able to get the sensor of daily steps working, in my example, it was being pulled from my watch, which is going to be sensor dot, and it's a Galaxy Watch 6 daily steps. I can go ahead and check that. If you had problems getting the daily steps and you had to follow my workaround, then what you're looking for is sensor.mobile_daily_steps, which is going to be this value here. Select that, then select continue, and you should see these values, and just go ahead and select add to dashboard, then click done. And if I just scroll down, you can see here are the buttons which we've added. You've got the daily step target, which you can change to whatever you want. It will default to 10,000, and you can make it 1,000 if you want to, or you can bump it up and make it 30,000. The other benefit of having this slider bar is you might want to create some sort of an automation where perhaps on the weekend you've got a higher or a lower daily step target. Here you've got the backlight. If you turn that off, it will turn off the screen. Again, might be useful in the evening if you want to turn it off or just change the brightness to another setting. I can't imagine why you'd want to turn the onboard LED on, but I've added it in case you want to. And then here I've got my current step count, which is shocking. So that's how you add it all to the dashboard. And that wraps up part 1. By now you should have your full step count showing on the cheap yellow display, complete with a smile or frown depending on your progress. In part 2, I'll show you how to trim the printed label, set up the 3D print orientation in Cura, and walk you through the full assembly step by step. So if you're building the full setup, be sure to check it out. You'll find a link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.